Welcome back to the Money Business Podcast. I'm Neal Regino.
I am Brian Weyman.
Today, we're going to talk about employer sponsored retirement plans.
All 27 of them now.
Yeah, the fun stuff. So everybody, if you're going 1099 or you're starting your own business, everybody asks, what should I be doing? I'm funding an IRA. Is there anything else I should be doing? And I think we're going to start with the basics. So
Yeah, the answer is it really depends.
yeah. So I think starting with the basics is if you're a single employer and you don't have any employees unless it's a spouse, to start with SEP IRA. In order, let's just say you want to put 50,000 in, you'd have to make $200,000 in order to put 25% in there. Now, if you have employees, you have to contribute to theirs as well, which is why it won't make sense. But the SEP is completely tax deductible. When you put the money in, you defer it until you retire or until age 59 and a half, and then you can pull the money out.
SEP is great, in my opinion, for people who are for people who are independent contractors.
Yep.
Real estate folks that get a 1099, mortgage people that get a 1099, anybody in a certain sales position where they sell a product and they don't work for the company and they get a 1099, all have that ability to put money in the SEP. So that to me is, that's a very overlooked thing for them. So many times I'll talk to people in some type of industry that is 1099. I ask them, well, have you opened up a SEP for yourself? They're like, oh, I don't have a retirement plan because I work for myself, and well, open up a SEP.
Yep.
It's easy to do.
The next progression would be a simple 401k, simple IRA. Simple IRA, you can put in a maximum $13,000 no matter what your income is. It just has to be over the $13,000, so you don't have to worry about hitting a certain threshold. You do have to contribute for your employees, and then your employees can also contribute. Both of those options keep the administrative costs down. I personally don't administer simple 401ks because they are, simple IRAs.
You're making up your own product.
I apologize. I don't do them a lot because they're right for a lot of companies. They keep the cost down. They make it so you can put in more money than an IRA. However, they are a lot to administer. So I personally tell a client, if it makes sense, go talk to a record keeper like a Vanguard or Fidelity and do this yourself. But really where we start to step in and show our expertise is when you get to the 401k side. There is a limit to what you can put in out of your paycheck, which is for anyone under the age of 50, $23,500. If you're over 50, $30,500, you can put in as paycheck deductions. But there's also other benefits to it as well. So first of all, the way that they work is in order for you to max out, you have to make sure that it passes something called discrimination testing. So if you're an owner or you make over $150,000 a year as as an employee, you can't max out your contributions unless the rank and file employees contribute enough so that it doesn't become what's called top heavy. There's simple ways around that, which are you can do a safe harbor plan. 3% you put in for all employees, regardless of whether they contribute or not. And then they're fully vested in that if they left. The second progression to that is safe harbor match. Employee puts in 5%, the employer puts in 4%. That allows the higher earners and the owners to max out their contributions. And then the next one is one that, especially in a lot of our clients, they have seasonal employees. It's something called a QAC, a Qualified Automatic Contribution Arrangement. An employee has to put in 6% in order to get 3.5%. Now you can put a 2-year vesting schedule on that match, so that if an employee leaves within 2 years, they're not fully entitled to that money. The other thing is you can set eligibility requirements on a 401k where you can say an employee's eligible the day they start working, or you can say, hey, they're not eligible for 6 months or a year or 2 years. And that allows it, especially if you have seasonal workers or turnover that you know they're probably not going to stick with the company for a long time, then you can make it so that they're not eligible for the plan. You're only taking care of the people that are loyal that you want to stick around for a long time. And it's beneficial. Now the administrative costs, you have to pay a third party administrator that actually keeps track of the discrimination testing, the Form 5500 you file for taxes, any type of audits that need to be conducted, paperwork, correspondence that goes out. The third party deals with a record keeper, which is the investment firm. Um, and all these things come with a cost. So you have to weigh whether or not you're in a place where it's worth starting one of these.
Right. So your cliff notes are, your cliff notes are, do I do a safe harbor, not a safe harbor? It depends, right? Depends on who's contributing, who's not, and what the cost is to you.
Yep.
How much you can afford to contribute to the employees. Is it worth you as the owner for the tax benefit to which plan is going to be most beneficial to you as the owner and the company to what you're putting away? Regardless of what you pick, you can't just pick your favorite employees. You can't say Jim did a good job this month, so he's going to be in the 401k, but Mike can't be in the 401k because I don't like Mike anymore. So, you can't discriminate that way. You can, like you said, you can put a timing schedule there. I personally think in all the business owners I've ever worked with, I always lean more towards seeing them do a 401k than a simple plan, even though it's technically there's a little more administration. But to me, um, it gives them a lot more. I feel like they have more flexibility in what they're choosing in the 401k plan than a simple.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of states, so we're in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, there's states that are implementing mandatory retirement plans. And if you don't create your own, you have to use a state plan. But I think it's worth stopping and talking about Secure 2.0 that was implemented last year. So for any startup 401k or any simple plan in the last 3 years that converts to a 401k, there's a tax credit available. So the credit is a $500 startup credit, $250 for auto enrollment. So every plan has to have auto enrollment, which means every employee's paycheck is going to be deducted unless they opt out of it before the start date. And then there's a up to $1,000, roughly, depending on the size of the company, per employee that makes under $100,000 in employer contribution. So if you put in $1,000 to a rank and file employee as a match, then you have $1,000 credit for that employee. And that credit, it reduces over 5 years, but it lasts for 5 years. So we can actually run the numbers with an employer and an actuary with the third-party administrator, and you can figure out what your tax credits are. And there's cases where the plan will not cost anything, or it may even be a net positive with the tax deductions, what's staying in the owner's pocket, and these tax credits involved as well. So it is a good time to start thinking about 401k if you haven't already been thinking about it, and at least getting the education on what it would look like. So Brian and I have been implementing a lot of 401ks in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Then the next part to that is profit sharing. So profit sharing can be paired with your 401k. It's discretionary. You don't have to put money into it every year. You can fund it up until you file your taxes the following year. But what that says is, okay, we had a really big year. Maybe your company wants to bonus out employees. You can put part, if not all of it, into this profit sharing portion of their 401k. And there's a lot of different ways to base that number off of. So it's going to depend on the makeup of your company as far as age, income, what type of work it is. But you can contribute based on income. You can contribute based on age and income. And there's a lot of different discrimination tests to figure out what the number is. But ultimately, you could say, hey, I either want to max out what I can give everybody and try to put the most money in the owner's pocket and then we can figure out which testing makes the most sense. Or an employer could say, hey, we've got an extra $100,000 we want to give to our employees. How do we put 75 or the full 100,000 into this profit sharing and receive a tax write-off for it while also benefiting the employees? You can put a vesting schedule onto that as well, so it incentivizes them to stay again.
I think it's important for employers to understand profit sharing, because the term alone could scare you.
Yeah. The big thing I always get across with that is it's discretionary.
Right.
Meaning
You don't
do
have
not
to do
have
it
to
every
do it.
year.
Yeah. So if one year you have a big year, even if you have 2 big years in a row, but the second year you want to reinvest the money back into the business, you don't have to fund the profit sharing.
Right.
Um,
So to overview this, I like, you know me, I like the overview.
yeah.
I'm an overview guy. SEP plans, good for the sole proprietor, no employees. SEP plans are good for the 1099 independent contractor, because SEP is just for you. If you have employees, then you're forced to put money in every year. Simple plans, if you have employees, there is, you can wait 2 years, I believe it is, before you have to contribute anything into a simple plan for the employee. Then you have to contribute 3% every year. And then the 401k plan, there's multiple plans you can pick and determine what's the best way to do it. Are you going to do a safe harbor where you don't really care how much the employees put in, but you're going to put in, there's a cost to that? Or are you going to do a plan where you're going to contribute for the employees as well? So back to what I said, all these different things really depend on you and the size of the company. At the end of the day, though, if you have employees, you're really incentivized right now to do a 401k plan. And to me, if you are an independent contractor, you're missing the boat if you're not setting yourself up with a SEP.
Yeah. One last part to this that doesn't make sense for everybody, but when it's the right situation, defined benefit plans. So it's a pension plan. What it is everything else we've talked to at this point is a defined contribution plan, meaning you define what you're putting in. A defined benefit is trying to determine what you're going to get out of the plan. It's based on your age and your income. And for typically, you want employers with 10 employees and less, and a discrepancy or difference between age and or income with the owner and the rest of the employees, because it allows the owner to put a lot more money in their own pocket. It still benefits the other employees, but ultimately we want things that are going to be mutually beneficial. But with those, it's the biggest deduction out of the plans that you can put in and still keep the money in your pocket. So, for instance, you may be able to put $250,000 a year into the owner's pocket, depending on what they're claiming in income, and they get a deduction for that, and they also keep the money in their pocket. And the thought is to keep it in there until you decide that you're in a lower tax bracket before you start pulling the money out later, so you pay less taxes on it at a different time. These also, they're great when you have really good cash flow. You want to have consistent cash flow, because the issue is if you start one of these, you have to fund it every year for 5 years at least. And if you don't have the cash flow to fund one of these, then it doesn't make sense. So you want smaller companies, I'd say 10 employees or less, typically. This difference in age and income with the owners and the rest of the employees, and really strong cash flow, it would at least make sense to explore this option.
I think we could run an entire podcast or 3 on defined benefit plans and how they can work and how they cannot work, and when it's a good time and bad time with them. That's a whole nother podcast by itself.
Yep.
So, all right, I think we're good time-wise. We don't want to run too long. So, again, I'm Brian Weyman.
And I'm Neal Regino.
With Evolution Financial. Thanks for tuning in.